Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to this episode of Shariah Intelligence, where today we will be looking at a subject related to the maqasid, qawaid, and usul al-fiqh. It's to do with what to do when scholars differ, what to do when jurists differ. Inshallah, I am your host, Muhammad Nuruddin Lemu, and with me to discuss this issue are two of our distinguished trainers and facilitators of this course, Sister Salatu Sulay and Brother Nasir Bello. You are both most welcome. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
By way of recapping, if both of you, starting with Madam Nasir, could give us an overview of why do scholars agree, what type of issues do they agree on, why do they differ, and what's the reason for which we would find differing opinions by scholars? I know we've discussed this in the past, but just by way of recap.
Of course, what you would find regarding this issue of what to do when scholars differ and what are the areas of agreement and areas of disagreement, you would find all scholars agreeing on the evidence that are qat'iyyu thubut, qat'iyyu dilala, those evidence that establish what we call ma'lum min ad-din bil-darura, the fundamentals of the religion, that establish aqidah, that the kind of evidence that scholars use in takfir and what have you. So those evidence that deals with the fundamentals, you find all of them agree. And on the contrary, if you come to the domain of the dhanni evidences, that is where there is difference of opinion, there is speculation, there is some level of presumption, either at the level of the thubut, that is at the level of the authenticity, of authority of the source, or at the level of dilala, you find scholars differing. Differences of opinion among scholars in every field is normal. It's a normal thing. You find scholars and specialists differing in every field.
Not just religion.
Not just religion, of course. And sometimes these differences is to do with debate among specialists of different sub-field under a particular subject area or in a particular difference of Islam. You would find it to do with differences and debate between scholars of hadith, for example, and the scholars of tafsir, or mufassirun, we call muhaddithun, scholars of hadith, who are specialists in hadith, and of course specialists in tafsir, which is the ulum al-Quran, interpretation, sciences of the Quran, and interpretation of scholars of fiqh and scholars of hadith. And a specialist, as we all know, is somebody who knows a lot in a particular subject, in a particular field. And that will not necessarily mean him knowing so much in other fields. So it could be interpreted as somebody who knows a lot in a particular subject area, but quite little in other fields. Scholars, so they need to be humble when you hear differences of opinion, particularly students of knowledge among scholars, and to begin to ask about the specialization of the scholars and what is the issue at stake. Scholars, to use this very important metaphor to describe how to relate with the whole idea, scholars are like trees that bears fruits. Some fruits are ripe, some are rotten, some are raw. So the idea is some are really good and sweeter than others. So the idea is for you to pick those that are good, those that are ripe, and probably those that are raw, you have to wait for them to be ripe enough for you to use them. And those that are rotten, probably it has to do with the context and understanding, and to not cut the tree. Take what you can use and not cut the tree. They need to have greater respect for scholars and appreciate their contribution and acknowledge the fact that some of them are still learning, some of them are still trying to understand the context.
They're human.
Exactly. So this idea of respect for scholars, appreciating their contribution, and trying to give them excuse where they actually go wrong, or where their fruits appear to be rotten or appear to be not ripe enough. Some of the causes of differences among scholars are to do with the silence or ambiguity in the text. And this is the area of dhanni. This is the area of presumption, as we discussed in the past in other episodes. This is the area of speculation and presumption in both the thubut and of course the dilala. And therefore you find as established that in this particular domain, different schools of thought, different madhahib coming with an entirely different approach as to how they deal with the evidences. And therefore the idea of difference of opinion will continue to exist because of this diversity and difference in terms of approach. Another example why you find scholars differing is this issue of the context, difference in context. This has to do with the geographical context, it has to do with the sociology or the social setting of an environment, it has to do with the economic context and many other things that you can think of. Sometimes it has to do with even context in the with respect to gender, how sometimes women would look at a particular issue and their sensitivity towards it will be different from how the men will look at it. These are things that are becoming more clear in our contemporary time. How people in different parts of the world will approach a particular issue will be entirely different from the way they, because of the cultural sensitivity, because of the political reality, and many other influences that you usually find with scholars. And also, this could be a historical, difference in context. And you can see if you are reading some of the contributions of some of the classical scholars, how their context have influenced their output in terms of the product of their own ijtihad, and how even contemporary scholars, their historical and geographical context influencing. In fact, sometimes even their background are influencing actually the output. So the need for us to acknowledge this diversity in context and how it comes to influence the kind of ijtihad, the outcome the outcome of the works of scholars, and how sometimes this is very good for the ummah because it provides room for rahmah, for you to choose from experiences and understandings of different scholars, and how sometimes this could create a problem. So these are some of the legitimate reasons why scholars differ, and that will continue to happen till the end of time because these are things that we cannot do anything about them.
You will always find verses of the Quran that are mutashabihat, that are not, explicitly clear there. You will always find scholars using different tools, and you will always find scholars in different contexts and affected or influenced positively or otherwise by their contexts. Salah, what other reasons would you give why scholars would differ?
Scholars would differ when they are dealing with apparently contradicting texts on a particular issue. You have verses of the Quran or a hadith that seem to contrast and contradict each other. When this happens, the scholars have to make a decision about what to do with that verse, and there are different options open to the scholars. So some scholars might choose to do what they call jam, which is to reconcile, to harmonize the apparently contradicting texts by finding a reason why these two texts can be applied together without contradicting each other. That's one. Another thing that the scholars might do is what we call nask, where the scholar concludes based on his own understanding of the text and other factors that one of these texts has actually abrogated the other or has been abrogated by the other, or this one supersedes that one because, and they will give their own reasons. That's the second thing. The third way they respond to this apparent contradiction is by doing what's called tarjih, which is to look at both text and take what they believe is the stronger one. So they will do their own analysis of the strength of each source of evidence. Or the scholar might choose to do what's called tawakkuf, which is to actually pause, wait, not move forward, but not conclude just yet on which is stronger, which should be taken, which should be taken. Some might choose to do tahayyur, which is to make a choice, looking at both sources of evidence and concluding that they are of the same level. So one or the other, they are equal. So the scholar then makes a choice. The sixth thing that the scholar might do is to say, I don't really know why these two texts seem to contradict each other. I can't think of any other way thing to do about them. So I'll put them aside and then use some other tool or source of evidence. Very often they might go by way of istihsan, so that they just leave the controversy alone.
He just goes with his own discretion.
His own discretion, yes. That's what's called the circuit. Now, when we talk about these options open to scholars, it might then seem as though that solves the problem of conflicting opinions, but it doesn't, because I've just listed 6 options. So one scholar could go with one option, let's say Takhayyur, another scholar goes with maybe Jam. And the very fact that they have chosen different approaches, they would arrive at different opinions, and so the conflict or the divergence remains. And this is human nature. As long as Allah creates human beings to be distinct in little ways from one another and puts us in different contexts and settings, we will always have differences of opinions among humans, scholars included.
So we just have to learn to agree to disagree.
Yes, agreeably.
Agreeably.
Yes.
I'd like to move on to the main discussion we want to go into, which is what to do when scholars differ. So, yes, there's what you said, Nasir, about specialists, in one field disagreeing with the other on issues. And one simple thing is, wait a minute, who are the specialists? Do they have a consensus on their area? We go with them. So you go with Muhaddithun on the authenticity of a hadith, you go with a Mufassir on the meaning of a verse of the Quran, you go with fiqh or a faqih or mujtahid on issues to do with ijtihad, etc. Where you are dealing with mujtahids, like the 4 schools, where you are dealing with scholars who are jurists of law, and they still differ, for the various reasons you've given, either the context, either the text is silent or ambiguous, and they come with their own methodologies, or the evidences seem to conflict with each other. It may be a verse or a text, it may be qiyas conflicting with amal, it may be this conflicting with that, and they have various ways of responding to this diversity. Yes, it is agreed if they could reconcile, that would be best. Some would feel, I'm not convinced by your reconciliation. I feel more comfortable with my tarjih and elimination, or picking what they prefer. Where you have jurists who disagree, what are the options for people? Because for some, it's more like paralysis. The scholars disagree, I don't know what to do. Do I just pick? Do I just go with my madhab? Do I listen to my own conscience? What are the options given by scholars when it comes to what to do when scholars of a field differ?
The difference of opinion among scholars sometimes actually leads to confusion among the everyday Muslim, where the person just is, these scholars are confusing everybody. I've heard statements like that. And I think that comes from the point of someone who is not aware of the legitimate options when scholars have those differences. So to quickly list them, a person could choose to go with the strongest opinion, that is analyzing the evidence and then choose what one believes is stronger. A person could choose to go by way of the opinion that aligns best with the Maqasid al-Shariah. A person could choose to go with the madhab, his madhab or the madhab prevalence in his place, or choose one and then stick with it. A person could also choose to go with the local scholars. What's the opinion of the scholar in your locality? Or someone might look at the culture of the place where this matter is arising and choose to go with any opinion that is most compatible with that culture. Now, a person could say instead, let me go with the expert. So it could be expert with regards to the Islamic sciences, or expert with regard to the issue at stake, maybe it's health or it's
Person could
administrative
choose
cost.
instead.
Yes, so just go with expert opinion. A person could choose instead to say, what do the scholars, the majority of scholars, what do they think? Or even if not the majority, what is the consensus among scholars? So that's another option. Yet another option is to say, I will go with the authority, the leadership, whichever position the leadership, that's not talking about political, administrative leadership, whichever position the leadership has taken, I'll just go with that position. Or a person could say, I'll do what is easiest for me, what is most convenient for me. Or the person could then say, I'll go with my conscience. And all of these options have backing by scholars, some by Quran Hadith, and I know we'll come to them in a minute, inshallah.
Could you tell us more about the choice of these? Are they mutually exclusive? For many people, even hearing 10 options is confusing enough. How do you go about it?
Okay. First of all, there's no ranking. I just listed them as I remember them, so there's no ranking. So a person can just choose, fine, I'll go with the math, and that's okay. There is no give justification for the why. That's the first thing. There's no ranking. All these options are legitimate. What a person should be most concerned about is what's the issue and what is the best way to attain the maqasid of Sharia on this matter. That is always the ultimate thing. What's your intention? What's the purpose that this will achieve? There should not be blind followership. It shouldn't be I'm going with my scholar because I've always followed this scholar forever. There should be that, smart trust. So trust those in authority, trust those with knowledge, but be smart about it. Trust and verify. So that is also something to take note of. This choosing which of these options to adopt, whichever one a person chooses out of the 10, the person will still have to apply some thinking, of course. Some critical thinking has to come in. So there's a need to be critical in one's thinking without necessarily being disrespectful of any scholar. So choosing maybe to go with local scholars doesn't mean be disrespectful of the scholar from some other locale or community. Choosing to go with expert opinion doesn't mean being disrespectful of a scholar or another expert who holds a different opinion. So those are the things that should come into a person's mind when saying which of these should I follow, should I choose. And inshallah, whichever one chooses, with the maqasid clearly in mind, may Allah accept it.
Nasser, would you add anything to that?
Well, I think maybe another important factor to look at is the level of grounding in the religious sciences that the person asking question or trying to find which to choose from the variety of options presented has is also a very significant, very important element in the choice of which, because I'm here dealing with, or if you look at the first suggestion or the first option she presented is go with the strongest opinion. And going with the strongest opinion will require some level of expertise and knowledge in the issues we've been discussing in the last few episodes about understanding the depth, the methodology, having some understanding and knowledge of the usul, maqasid, qawaid, for you to be able to weigh and see because you are talking about after you are talking about which one is the strongest. You are talking about what are the evidence presented by all the scholars. How do you even reconcile all the evidence, or who has much stronger evidence? So you have to be a scholar yourself for you to get to the level of doing this kind of things. So that is one interesting thing about this particular suggestion or recommendation by scholars of go with the strongest opinion. I would think this is a recommendation for another level of scholars to even sit down and analyze and see But I think what is important in this particular, under this particular recommendation, is the statement by Imam Shafi'i when he talks about the need for you to feel in your mind, even if okay, this you think is the strongest opinion, or what you hold as the strongest opinion might be the weakest opinion. So having that sincerity and respect for the opinion of others and that open mind that will really sincerely look at the evidence presented by others and the need to respect the views of others, to be humble enough to appreciate their line of argument and where they are coming from essentially. So I think this, under this particular suggestion or recommendation, this is the important thing. That if, although even if you are convinced that the opinion you choose at the end of the day is the strongest, you need to respect other opinions and not to feel okay, these other opinions don't matter, because a lot goes into the crafting of a fatwa. Probably some of the variables considered by other scholars are not known to you, and that's why you are relegated. And I think you will find this a lot with how people look at the views of scholars, particularly classical scholars of Madhab, because what you find is the output without necessarily seeing how they arrive at that, as you know, our books of fiqh. So sometimes some people look down upon the books and they belittle them, thinking it's just a whims of the scholars.
Just conclusions.
Yeah, they're just conclusions because they don't see the amount of work that goes into that. And that is how somebody will just, sometimes you ask a contemporary scholar and he quoted a hadith and he said, okay, that is wrong, this is the hadith, this is what is explained. Not knowing, for example, if you go back to some of the works of the Maliki scholars or Shafi'i scholars or Hanbali scholars and see how they exchange and share knowledge amongst themselves in trying to defend their position, and how they are able to resolve and respond to some of these issues. Then you will understand that it's not about looking at the outcome or the conclusion. They need to have greater respect for what actually they went through. And I think the work of Ibn Rushd, Bidayatul Mujtahid wa Nihayatul Muqtasid, is a very good example of a book that if you consult, you will find and you will have greater respect and appreciation for the work that these scholars have done.
MashaAllah. Sister Salah mentioned 10 alternatives, courses of action, and each one of them, as you said, valid, depending on, as you mentioned, the level of knowledge the person has. Some choices may be open to them, not others, depending on probably what the issue is. Is it a national issue? Would be dependent on who's the best to decide on this, the context, the case, and sometimes it's not either this or that. Do you go with the majority or do you go with the specialists? Sometimes it's a combination that scholars would recommend for a particular case. You have mentioned and discussed one, which is going with the strongest opinion based on its evidence, and that would have been ideal, and the evidence that had been reconciled would have been ideal. But many people are not that competent, as we've already highlighted. What are the next options for people when it comes to different opinions? So if we looked at option number one, go with the strongest opinion based on its evidence, what would you call number two?
Number two is somehow similar to number one, but easier to do in the sense that the second option, we look at the ruling or the opinion that best matches or aligns with or best achieves the Maqasid Sharia. Why this is easier to do than the first option, which is to go with the strongest opinion, is the knowledge of the Maqasid is easier, more accessible, simpler to understand once one learns it, than trying to figure out of all the secondary tools which ones did this particular scholar use. views. And if you are an everyday Muslim, like many of us are, you don't even know which school the scholar belongs to, let alone know where to start from. So when you look at the Makosid, that's a faster way. The Makosid then serves as, the compass for everything. That whatever methods that scholar used, whatever evidence the scholar based his or her opinion on, at the end of the day, you are asking a simple question. In what way does this bring benefits? And does it bring the greatest amount of benefits to the greatest amount of people? That's one. On this issue also is the maxim that reminds us that when it comes to the affairs of a leader, the basis, the guiding principle, the guiding idea should be maslaha. That is bringing benefits to the people generally. So also as an individual, when you are looking at an opinion and trying to think, should I go with this opinion or not? If that is the guiding principle for a leader, the hadith actually mentions an imam, then that should be the principle one would presume for the scholar who was giving that opinion. And you also go by way of that because everything is grounded in the purpose that it fulfills. Lastly, I want to also mention that when it comes to trying to fulfill the maqasid, what many of the scholars try to do is they would use these istidlal tools. And these are tools that are also simpler to understand than some of the other tools. So we see once again why this second option might be easier for the everyday Muslim. And for example, when we talk about issues to do with moon sighting, and we hear the debates, we hear different opinions. There are some who say no, you should sight the moon, with your eyes. There are those who say if you have tools that help you predict when the moon will appear, why do you need to wait and search the sky for it? It's already there. Now you have the tools to calculate and be sure of that. Sometimes this leaves people wondering, so if I go with a sighting opinion, is that the better option? If I go with the opinion of calculation, is that the better option? When we bring it down to a question of apostasy, what is the purpose of sighting the moon? What is the moon? What is its significance? If it's about calculation of time, then it helps one know, okay, let me do A or let me do B. Well,
Unnecessary contribute to this discussion.
Well, I think some of the other examples that one could remember, can remember, is this idea of expansion of the space for Tawaf and Rajab in Hajj, which is basically trying to appreciate the fact that the population of the Muslims is expanding and there is a need for you to have a bigger space that accommodates that. And I think these are some of the arguments that the scholars who gave fatwa on the permissibility of doing that give. Another important example that looks at the maqasid is this issue of respecting curfew for security purpose. There is a problem, there is a security challenge in the society, and a curfew has been sanctioned just to douse tension, to solve problems, to avert some of the problems that may likely escalate. The need for Muslims to respect that. Sometimes you see scholars issuing fatwa that you should respect that. You don't look at it from the angle of I am deprived of the opportunity and the freedom that I have. And I think this is somewhat similar with this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ regarding the issue of pandemic. That when there is pandemic in a society, those inside should not go out and those outside should not come in. That I think is looking at safety, is looking at trying to protect those that are outside from being infected by the pandemic and trying to cage those that are inside from spreading the this idea of quarantine. So this is also, if you look at it, there is this wisdom of looking at the harm that it could create to those outside, and of course ultimately to cage and to help in averting the effect or the harm of the problem that this will cause if it escalates. Another exemplary ban is the case of, for example, temporary banning the wearing of niqab for the purpose of security. In some societies where you would find cases of suicide bombers putting on niqab, you will find scholars issuing fatwa for the purpose of security that for some time this should be banned. The wearing of niqab is banned so that at least faces of people can be seen. And in fact, sometimes in some places they even go to the level of hijab because of the nature of the situation and how lives are being lost and what have you. Is it the best thing to do? Probably no, but this is a situation, and therefore you look at the maqasid of protecting life as a better priority, as a bigger goal, a bigger objective than uh, the maqasid of wearing niqabs or hijab. So these are some of the examples that you can find that could be an addition to the ones presented by Sister Salatu.
So we've looked at go with the strongest opinion if you are able to assess the evidence. We've looked at where you can have difference of opinion among scholars, and even scholars would say on this issue it is better to go with the maqasid, especially if it's affecting community, society, and that is the priority consideration. Nasir, what else are on the table?
Well, I think you can find another suggestion or recommendation by scholars which will say go with your mazhab. Why? Because that is something that is everybody is most familiar with. I mean, if you look at the world, you will find different countries adopting a particular mazhab in running of the affairs of their people. In fact, if you go to their courts, this madhahib are the provisions of the madhahib are the ones that are guiding people and regulating civil cases, and for example sometimes there are criminal cases in some countries. If you go to Pakistan, for example, you will realize that they are Hanafi. If you come to Nigeria and most of West African countries, we are Maliki. We follow the Maliki Mazhab, at least at the level of the state. If you go to places like Malaysia, you will realize that they are Shafi'i. Some parts of the Middle East are Hanbali. So this familiarity with what you know, this exposure with something that is very you are familiar with, and if you go to in the event of something happening between Muslims that require going to court, still you will find the judge using these provisions of this madhab to solve some of the problems that happen. And again, there are certain things that are peculiar to some madhab. So if you bring in another thing that is from another madhab, you would appear to be quite different, and probably that will even affect the way some people will look at you, the way you are going to be relating with people. And some of these issues that actually emanate from these kind of things, to a large extent, if you look at the maqasid of unity and brotherhood, you would think it is not even something that you should, it is uncalled for actually. If you look at, for example, the language or the wordings of Adhan, for those in West Africa that are following Maliki, they go with the riwayah of Amanthura, which is supporting the takbir on the basis of this amal, supporting the position. Although the hadith is ahad, but because of amal they support it. But other madhahib, you see them going with the riwayah of Bilal, for example. So these are sharp difference or uniqueness that Maliki seem to have that you hardly can find in other places. So, and these are sensitive issues that if, for example, now you go to another place using the same wordings of Adhan, probably you may not find it funny.
So you don't know what you're doing.
Exactly, and the level of tolerance will be another thing, because for some people, if you are not really going in line with the mazhab that is known, they don't, because it's not everybody that knows difference of opinion. This scholar said this is the position of this school. So the conclusion for some is, if you are not doing it the way it's done here, that means you don't know, and you are making a great mistake. And probably some people will even begin to think of praying behind you with this kind of approach that you come up with. So sensitivity to this kind of issues. You would find differences between madhahib on the issues of For example, on the issues of marriage, issues of marriage contract, how different aspects of marriage are viewed differently by some madhahib. So in order to avoid abuse of, the tool of tanfiq, which allows for when there is a haja or darura, you look at what is the provision of another madhab for ease and solution to some of the problems. Some are using, legal tricks for example, we know very well in the Shafi'i madhab, you can delay payment of mahar. In the Maliki mazhab, in the Hanafi mazhab, they don't consider the issue of,
consent of the wali.
exactly, consent of the wali as something, something that necessary, is just being encouraged. So you find people uh, looking at these loopholes, and now somebody will come and say, okay, I want to marry this sister, the mahar can be delayed, and okay, where is the wali? No, we don't need to have a wali. Why? Because the Hanafi Mazhab said this. And in the Shafi'i Mazhab, you can. So, this kind of tricks, abuse of this kind of tricks could be another reason why we need to be very sensitive, be very serious about these kind of things. Another very important issue that Maliki, for example, are very much different and unique is from some of the other madhahib, and it could be an issue in some places is this issue of khutbah and the language of khutbah. While some madhahib will argue that you can use another language for khutbah, some of the scholars in the Maliki school will insist that it has to be in Arabic, for example. So these are some of the issues that you will always find uh, uh, peculiar with some madhaib, some schools of thought, and much as people that are knowledgeable will understand the difference of opinion and will see it as normal. In some societies, they don't take these things lightly, and sensitivity to them and being cautious and respecting these things is very, very important. So, on the basis of this, some scholars insist or recommend that you should just go for with the madhab so that at least you will be on the safe side.
So on issues where it's tied to law of the land, you don't want to get into trouble. It's good to know what the law is. If you are in Nigeria and it's Maliki law, then make sure you take that into cognizance and consideration. If you're in Shafi territory, so to speak, Malaysia, know the law of the land and respect it. When it comes to, and you've mentioned this, sometimes if you try to insist on your own madhab in a place where nobody knows your madhab, nobody understands your own legal reasoning, you may actually end up being discredited, creating confusion, and the need, especially if you are somebody that is respected in the community, to not go and create confusion. While, yes, sometimes you believe a position is wrong, and there are other gentler ways of bringing change instead of just saying this is stronger, for the position of the school. Sister Salah, what else are the options that a person can, what are the options for somebody where scholars differ?
Yeah, I think before that, if I can just touch on this issue of the question of sticking with one madhab, there's also the emphasis that scholars have placed where they said, especially when you're looking at a locality, that it's good to have a unified focus on a matter within the locality, because this allows everybody know you might say minimum or maximum standards of behavior, and both with regards to interpersonal relationships and transactions, and even the legal implications of actions. For instance, you have those who hold the opinion that if a man pronounces divorce thrice in one instant, it's equal to one divorce. For some others, they will say, no, that's final. So if you have someone who says, well, I'm following the opinion that if I pronounce divorce thrice, it's one instant, but the legal system has the other opinion that it's final. As we say in Nigeria, a man who does that is on his own by the time the issue goes to court. your marriage is over, when it's like, oops, I was angry, but I did not realize the legal implication. Another implication of this question of understanding the madhab and having a either you are following the same or you are aware of the madhab of that area is this example of how we pray Salah. For instance, Radunuru mentioned in Malaysia where they follow the Shafi'i school. They believe that everybody should recite in Salah Surah Al-Fatiha compulsory for everybody. So what typically happens is the Imam recites Surah Al-Fatiha, then pauses briefly. Allowed, yes, and he has a short pause to allow the congregation to do their own recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha. Now imagine that such a person comes to Nigeria. He recites Surah Al-Fatiha aloud, then he's silent. And the congregation is now confused and wondering, did he fall asleep standing? Did he forget what's going on? Which actually causes distraction in their prayer, this confusion. And that thing of, we don't think we want to pray behind this person. He got confused when we were praying. He finished Surah Al-Fatiha, he couldn't remember any other surah. So that's very important. Now moving on to what other options are there, we could look at this idea of what about considering the majority opinion or the majority view or the consensus of the scholars. And the basis for this option lies in the fact that, just as we said for ijma as a tool of usul of fiqh, that there are verses of the Quran and the Hadith that indicate that the consensus of people, the consensus of Muslims being together with the community is a very, it's a highly valued thing in Islam. It's actually, that cohesion, that spirit of brotherhood is one of the maqasid of Sharia. So when one looks at it from this perspective, one can look at the hadith of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, where he was reported to have said that Allah's hand is with the majority. That's one strong basis for this particular view. So one can consider the majority opinion on the matter, and as long as it's not going to create any harm or any further problems, then the person could choose that. If scholars differ, then the person will just go with the majority view. And as they would sometimes say anyway, there's safety in numbers. When you have competent people working together, they help to correct and support one another.
And I think this is a very common thing we find in a lot of online fatwas, a lot of preachers. It makes sense. In medicine, if the majority of doctors say something, then it most likely takes weight. If the majority of dietitians say this is not good for you, usually that takes weight. And we find Muslims saying the majority of scholars say this. So it's understandable when people go with the majority, as you said, they're more likely to be right. However, it is important when you choose to go with the majority to recognize that is your choice. The majority may have an opinion that is out of date with the current issue and the opinion of a contemporary scholar who knows the situation, who's an expert of this issue, who should be listened to. And that is why it's always important to remember in the usul and adillah of fiqh, when you look at evidence for fiqh, while some scholars would take ijma as consensus of mujtahids, there is no such secondary source called jamhur or majority of scholars. No, you have qiyas, you have ijma, you have Quran and Sunnah, you've got, there's no such thing as majority opinion. And so it's really important when people choose to go with the majority to not think that is evidence in Sharia that overrides even a specialist or minority. Majority is majority. It doesn't mean it is right. As important as comforting as majority opinion may be. Al Nasser, what else could a person do when they find scholars differ?
Well, I think another very useful recommendation given by scholars on what to do is this opinion of you go with a local scholar. A local scholar is somebody who is very much familiar with the environment, with the context, and with the culture of the people and their oath generally, custom, culture, and other of the people, how they behave, how they run their life, what governs the affairs of their lives, and what have you. And so he knows the political landscape, he knows the economic system of that particular society, he knows a lot, and therefore his position or his understanding of fatwa will always be sensitive to this reality, will always take into cognizance the nature of the environment that he lives. And this is an element that I think is very, very important, particularly if you look at how bulk of our day-to-day affairs are actually in the areas of muamalat, and how urf plays a significant role in the way we run our affairs, be it in business, in our marital life, in our relationship with our family, with our friends, and others that are even non-Muslims. So the understanding of the context and the role that local scholars play in trying to provide guidance to Muslims in this particular that kind of situation is so important, so significant that some scholars suggest you go with the opinion of the scholars. Just think about issues around bull sighting and how it's always an issue in places like Nigeria every year. This issue of can you use electronic astronomical device on the issue of moon sighting of Ramadan or the Eid time that usually comes after Ramadan or during the Eid al-Adha, for example, which works with the issue of the lunar calendar that Muslims follow. There you will find the opinion of local scholars becoming more relevant on issues to do with the role that Urf played in our day-to-day life and activities. We in the past episode discussed about this qaida, this maxim of al-ada muhakkama, that custom is authoritative. Things that are known by the custom, so long as they don't contradict the spirit and the letter of the text of Sharia, they are all recognized as part of the Sharia, accommodated. And now think about what obtains in the culture when it comes to the language we use in transactions, for example, when it comes to some idiomatic expressions that goes into our relationship in the marital relationship, business relationship, and how somebody that is not in that culture will find it difficult to make sense of all this, and how things that are assumed differently based on the urf of the society will be misunderstood in taking some of the opinions of fatwas of other people. Look at issues around public health, for example, issues around economy, where you would always find local scholar looking at the context, having the environment, having the society in mind in trying to address some of these issues that usually come up. Politics in guiding people, because scholars are always, having the responsibility, always have the responsibility of giving guide to the society. Look at what happened in the politics of Pakistan some years back. The fatwa that Abu Ala al-Mududi gave between Fatima Jinnah and Ayub Khan, and the argument he put forward, that has to do with his understanding of the context. Because ideally, if you know the philosophy and the understanding and the approach of Maududi regarding the issue of women in leadership and what have you, you would assume he would go for the opposite. But because of his understanding of the context, he felt
and the people involved.
Exactly, and the people involved, he felt in this particular context, I think this person should be the best for the Ummah.
And he preferred Fatima Jinnah.
Exactly. He preferred Fatima Jinnah, despite his position generally about women leadership. And I earlier said a similar example here, how some scholars also went with the position of a woman leader, a woman as a governor, despite the fact that that is not what they preferred, but because of the understanding, their understanding, of the context. So I think these are some of the interesting things that you would find with the argument around go with the local scholar.
Salah, what would you add?
Yeah, as I listened to Brother Nasser, I found myself thinking of cases where in the school where I work, students would ask a question: is it okay if somebody does ABC? Or they might say, if an adult does XYZ, is that a good thing? And over time, I learned to be very sensitive to the student's experience, to those aspects that I didn't know about, so that I didn't give what is a straight answer, an answer that is logical, it makes sense, it's correct. But when you put it into the student's context, the context from which the question is coming, it is not the appropriate answer. We have actually even learned over time that when we have guest speakers or guests, coming to talk to students, we would always try to have a staff present so that the person knows that question this person answered in this way, it's coming from this point. If the person knew the backgrounds, the person would have given a different answer or approached the answer in a different way. So this helps us also look at a broader perspective when we come back to this issue now. Which scholar's opinion should one follow? And right now we're talking about following the opinion of the local scholar. The world is not a global village. So when we say local, we mean local with regard to space. But many times when we want an answer, we go online, we go to Google. And so we might go to Mufti this, Sheikh that, Professor such and such, and say, he said, without realizing or asking ourselves a few more questions. He said what to who? He said what when? In what place? In what area that had which custom or culture? When he said X, Y, Z, what did he have in mind? Is it what you have in mind when you picked up you with your phone and your keypad and your swiping? These are very important questions to ask, because the whole idea of following a local scholar is so that you hopefully get the fatwa that is most suitable for you, your time, your usage, your space. It is a local scholar who, when we talked about harm or hardship, we talked about the levels of people's condition. It's very often the local scholar who is more likely to have an accurate idea of what is the actual degree of hardship, what is the actual degree of difficulty being experienced or that might be experienced. What would be the actual impact if this decision is taken given this particular area? Now, when Brother Nasr was mentioning it, he also brought up the issue of culture. So we find that following a local scholar or choosing to go with the opinion that is most suitable, most aligned with one's culture, they actually have a relationship. I remember there was a time a young lady, a friend of mine, said she wanted to start wearing anklets because she had read about the wives of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam who, it was mentioned they wore anklets. Now she said she wanted to wear one. She did, she got an anklet, she started wearing it. And her mother was protesting. Take it off. Don't wear that, take it off. And I happened to visit them one day when this back and forth was going on. And she said, but it's allowed, it's permissible, it's halal, it's okay, I saw it in a hadith. Mom said, I don't want it. And when I came in, she looked at me and laughed and said, my mother is saying I should take off this anklet. And what's wrong with it? Is it not in the hadith? And I said, yes, it's in the hadith. I said, but in this part of our city, if you wear an anklet, it is one of those norms, unspoken cultural understanding. If you wear an anklet, you are, as they call it, a woman of the night. It's just believed. Only those kind of people wear anklets. It's like a quiet sit-down in the daytime. So I said, but that's why your mother, I think, is against it. And she said, I know, but it's in the hadith. And so eventually she agreed that it might be a good idea to take this anklet off for a while. So this is about the cultural side. That idea, so I'm going actually to the next option.
Before you go there, I just think some of the things you are talking about reminds me of this issue of when we say local scholars, we have geography in mind. But I think it's important for us to begin to look at it within the context of history and time. Just thinking and imagining the kind of world we live in today. as we discuss issues around economy, issues around politics, and how that relates to the position of scholars that lived, classical scholars that lived 600, 700 years ago, and how some of their positions actually are given priority. Imagine somebody who lived 600 years ago. What idea of a world do you think he has? What idea or understanding of politics that govern the affairs of people,
Yes.
the economy, the socio-economic settings? What kind of paradigm do you think he might have? And how can you on earth on these particular issues compare his opinion in position with the scholars that are living in the contemporary world, scholars that are living in the world of internet, scholars that have seen it all. They live in a world that is globalized. So this idea of associating originality in ijtihad and fatwa with that which is old, without necessarily segregating what subject exactly are you talking about. I think it's important in discussing this idea of go with the local scholars for us to bring into perspective this idea of okay, what is the subject area and who should probably be more authoritative. Think about, and again, some of the issues and the opinions are not really looked at within the context of political context or economic context of that particular scholar in question. I mean, think about some of the views of Ibn Taymiyyah that are being abused and trying to be implanted in this context, and forgetting the political atmosphere he found himself. And not just Ibn Taymiyyah, other scholars in the history, what they went through with the leadership of their system. Think about the kind of system they lived in, and why they made certain statements that they made, and how some people will just copy and paste these positions and bring it to a context like ours and begin to insist that it was the opinion of this sheikh, this how exactly. And now if a scholar in this contemporary time say no, wait a minute, no, you are disputing what this so sheikh
and majority of the past,
exactly,
which
exactly.
is actually archaic, irrelevant to the current context. And those scholars were not here
Exactly.
to see this reality.
They did not picture
And
this
yeah.
reality.
And you know what I usually think about now, if you just reflect the last 20 years, how the world was in the last 20 years and what really it is now, the changes that happened, that will just give you an idea, okay, go back 100 years and see what it is. And how probably somebody who lived 100 years or 200 years will, because we live in a world that is beyond his even imagination.
Yes.
The things that are happening today cannot be imagined. It is the routine that we see today that tend to be the impossible of yesterday. That which is impossible yesterday is what we see as routine today. So I think these complexities need to be looked at when discussing issues and when discussing this, particularly the implication of this idea of go with the opinion of the local scholar.
Absolutely. So I think here we find local, we mean local now, local contemporary scholar, aware, here in the now, but also here in the geography, when it applies to issues to do with politics, issues to do with economics, issues to do with the haja of the community. What exactly is, you need somebody who is in the community, who can sense the temperature of the community to tell you the trends,
events.
Exactly.
It's a local person who knows what was in the news 2 days ago, who knows what is likely to cause a big quarrel if you say it exactly as it is based on text.
To take us to the next one, related to this, and I think Madam Nasir has touched on this to an extent, when it comes to choosing the opinion that is more culturally appropriate, what more, Salah, can you tell us on this option?
As we remember, there is the maxim that Al-Adam that the culture of the people, the custom of the people, has the weight of law. Then we also have the Maqasid al-Sharia that talks about hifdul and the preservation of the dignity of people. When we show cultural sensitivity, we are valuing, we are giving respect to the knowledge that people have passed on over time, over generations. We are giving respect to the identity, the cultural identity that makes up or is part of every human being's sense of self. That's one. This does not mean that once it's culturally suitable, it's therefore fine. As I mentioned in the beginning when we started talking about the options available for the everyday Muslim, when scholars differ, the question still is does this option meet the Makosid Sharia? Will it bring benefit? And will it bring the greatest degree of benefit to the highest number of people? If that is so, then it makes sense to say, in that case, why not just go with the opinion that fits the culture? For the reasons I've given before, the maxim and the Maqasid, one. Secondly, if it's something that already fits the culture of the people, culture being the way we do our things. So a culture is it's a structure that already exists, that already helps organize our thinking, our responses, our behavior. Then it's easier for the people to accept the opinion, easier for people to therefore work with that opinion, easier for them to support whatever benefits that opinion is going to bring and to move towards it. It's no longer so disturbing or disruptive to them. It's at the level of disruption that they can absorb easily because it's no longer so foreign. There is this common saying that nothing about us without us, meaning respect our input, respect the contribution that we can make as a people. And by looking at the opinion that fits the culture, we actually help to do that for people.
So basically, both from the side of Qawaid,
yes,
the Islamic legal maxims, you have that backing, that al-ada muhakkama. In other words, whatever opinion is closest to what is most culturally accepted, it may be actually a cultural position held in that community that doesn't conflict with Sharia, and there are other views that conflict with that culture, but also don't conflict with Sharia. The one that is closest to that culture, that is Islamically acceptable, has the weight of law, has Sharia backing already. You've also mentioned the Maqasid supporting that, but we also have in Usul al-Fiqh Urf supporting that. And I think this is where we will find whether it is the style of dressing, what's male dressing, what's female dressing, what colors are locally considered, since the Quran and the Sunnah do not prescribe any color. Usually it is actually the scholar coming with his own cognitive culture that is prescribing, oh, this color is for male and this color is for women should not have colors in this way, or men should not have. This is usually coming from a cultural background, not Quran and Sunnah, from issues to do with what is male jewelry, what is female jewelry. The touring, for example, I think is what Aisha was the hadith about. The touring is visible.
Sometimes I think about
anklets.
Something about during the battle, and they were running around to fit soldiers.
MashaAllah. Yeah. So what we find is, the jewelry that men can wear, is it this type of ring? Is it that type of ring? Is it, a necklace? What can men use? What can women use? So this issue of not trying to be unnecessarily countercultural or
just
impose,
something is mubah.
Yeah, or nor imposing Muslim majority culture, whether it is Hausa, Fulani in northern Nigeria, or Kanuri, whether it is Pakistani or Malay, whether it is Arab or Swahili, whether it's Mandingo or any of these majority Muslim cultures. They need to really be sensitive that when a particular place has their own culture, that the opinion that is more in line with that culture, less disruptive, more acceptable, as you've already said, actually has the Sharia backing for it. The other one I'd like us to look at, when it comes to options for scholars, is this question of going with the specialist. Could you tell us more on this?
Well, I think another recommendation or suggestion is to go with the specialist. And the good thing about that, or the argument around that particular suggestion, is the benefit or the significance of learning from his technical competency, technical skills that are associated with the subject area. And as we all know, the Quran was very clear about asking or going to the specialist if you don't know in whatever field. The Quran says, "Fas'alu dhikr in kuntum la ta'lamun." And you find even in the tradition of Rasul how he resort to and inquire from people who know on different issues. Look at the issue of Antum A'lamu bi umuri dunyakum, for example. And therefore, this opinion is more to do with, if it is a fiqh issue, go to the expert or the specialist in fiqh, at least he knows the subject better. If it is an issue of Islamic finance, for example, or issue of takaful, for example, you then go to the expert in Islamic finance, because he is the one who knows the field better. He is the one who spends a lot of time trying to study and dig deeper. You don't get to it's just like having a problem with your eyes and going to the hospital and the ophthalmologist, who is a specialist in issues to do with eyes, saying, okay, this is what you should do, this is the opinion. And a general physician, somebody who is not really a specialist in any field, telling you, no, you shouldn't do that. Or maybe a specialist in another field, be it a dentist or an orthopedician, somebody who read orthopedics, for example, telling you, no, this is not what you should do. Ordinarily, you know what is right. You know who to trust, whose opinion actually you should respect. You should give more authority or more recognition to. So I think this is where this is the direction which this particular opinion or suggestion is tilting towards, because it's appreciating the complexity of the world. It's appreciating the fact that an expert in a particular field or a specialist in a particular field will definitely be a layman in another field. And therefore, if you want to be guided, it's better you go to the specialist. And even in the issues of religion, the sciences of the deen are so vast, so broad, and so complex that you need to get somebody who spent a lot of time in that particular corner and find out from him, because he's the advocate in that particular field. So this is the idea, acknowledging the complexity of the science, of the context, and the need to identify the expert in that particular field. And that is why it is often encouraged, even on the issues of difference of opinion, it's good to ask who is the specialist in this particular field. At least you will always find the views of the specialist are quite different with somebody who is very shallow, whose level of knowledge is not that deep.
You're a jack of all trades, master of none.
Exactly.
As opposed to master of some. And what would you add here?
That last point of the peculiarity that you might observe when the specialist gives an opinion, it usually ends up showing that, or rather it ends up being that the specialist opinion would quite often be the minority opinion, because the specialists in any field are often fewer than the generality. As you mentioned, someone who is a specialist in one field is a layman in another field. So when you say how many other specialist fields are there, in medicine for instance, you have so many. So naturally, when you have a neurosurgeon talking about a certain level of the brain and management of diseases to do with the brain, you'll find that your cardiologist cannot go that deep, your pediatric doctor can't go that deep, the person who deals with, let's say, the dermatologist can't go that deep. So this opinion will end up in the minority opinion, which takes us back to that issue of the majority opinion. So it's a caveat, it's something for us to be mindful of. That just because the majority said doesn't mean the majority is right. It's just that when we go by way of logic, we would say they are more probably correct. So this is something important to mention. And the second thing to mention with regards to specialist fields is, yes, you have the specialists with regards to the classical, the core Islamic sciences, knowledge of the Hadith, knowledge of the Quran, and so on. You also have specialists that deal with certain aspects of Islamic law, like Islamic criminal law, or Islamic thought, or Islamic finance, or issues to do with women's rights in Islam, or international relations from the Islamic perspective. So you have all these other areas of specialization that we should be aware of, so that when we are saying we want to go, maybe we are thinking of going with the specialist opinion, we know what kind of questions to ask, what kind of
Very
issues
much.
this, and
I like that.
expert in this area.
Thank you very much. And I like that point which you made, that very often the opinion of specialists is a minority opinion. You don't have a lot of, by definition, specialists are usually a few compared to the jack of all trades, masters of none, or master of something else. And just like in medicine, the latest, most effective medicine is known by a few. It takes time before it becomes the majority opinion. But you find many within the Muslim community taking that type of approach to fatwas, that on a particular issue that is of contemporary relevance, is mu'amalat, it's dealing with economy or politics or something that's tied to reality. You find some Muslims, unfortunately, saying they are going with the majority opinion of the past, scholars who never saw the current context, when the specialist who has studied the scholars of the past, but because he's contemporary, unfortunately, some people look down upon contemporary scholars who are specialists of those fields. So this issue of being really careful about just blindly following numbers, instead of recognizing who's the specialist, who are the Ahl al-Dhikr, and we find this problem on many topics, as you highlighted. So it's actually good to find out on issues to do with jihad, on issues to do with interfaith relations, on issues to do with women, on issues to do with inheritance, on issues to do with criminal law, on issues to do with Islamic political thought, Islamic economic thought, biomedical issues, to really find out who really has done their homework. On issues to do with psychiatry and Islamic psychology, along a lot of people, everything that's a mental disorder is jinn and in need of ruqya, and it's become an industry of people just duping, many others, unfortunately. Moving on, one of the other things you mentioned was the option that when scholars differ, you've mentioned various alternative courses of action, but one is to take the opinion that is easiest.
Yes.
To take the opinion that is most convenient. How is this justified? Where is this relevant?
What comes to mind immediately is the hadith where Aisha radiallahu anha was reported to have said that whenever the Prophet ﷺ had to choose between two options, he would pick that option which was the easier one, as long as it did not contradict, Shariah. He would go with, if the two, so I call it, choosing between two mubahs or two halals, both okay, both permissible, both doable, then pick the easier one. Another justification is the well-known ayah where Allah says that Allah wishes for us ease, He doesn't wish for us hardship. Yuridullahu bikumul yusra wa la yuridu bikumul usra. So these justifications give one basis for saying if the two options from the little knowledge one has are both permissible or both mubah, or maybe it's even the scholars holding the different opinions that are actually making that declaration, then the person can just say, let me go with what is easier to do. For instance, we look at the opinion of scholars when it comes to sujood al-sahwi. When one forgets to do something in Salah, maybe you missed, you forgot something anyway. And the question is, should you do the prostration of forgetfulness before you do the taslim, or should you do it after? That's that whole division between Qabli and Ba'di. You have those scholars who actually make that kind of distinction. But if you are confused, you are not sure, you wonder, okay, what should I do? There's the opinion that just do either one. This is meant to just make it easier for us. So we have these. And there's also the question of the duration of custom, which is if one is traveling, there's that concession, the rukhsa, given to one who is a traveler in a place, that the person can shorten certain salat and then pray them combine them at certain times. There are those who hold the opinion that this is something you can do if you are staying in a place for up to 4 days. There are others who hold a different opinion. Whichever the opinion is, there are those who say whichever it is rukhsa, it's a concession. So we shouldn't get, when you now see the different opinions, choose do what's easier. Do what's easier for you as a traveler, because that's the opposite of the whole concession given by Allah. Anyway.
Nasir.
Well, I think if you look at the verses and the prophetic traditions that speaks to this idea of easing things for people, and this idea of relaxation and making religion and matters of the day such a thing that is so convenient for people, and people will approach it with this enthusiasm and desire to commit to it. Then you can understand why this group of scholars suggest that you should go with the easiest opinion. She mentioned this prophetic hadith where Aisha radiallahu anha talked about Rasulullah whenever he's given a choice between two things, he always look at the easiest one. So if it is about faith and iman and commitment, at least Rasulullah should be on the top of the pyramid. But it's the same Rasulullah that in trying to guide us is always choosing. And look at how Rasulullah frowned at any decision that any of the companions attempt to make on trying to make things difficult. Look at what he said to Mu'az. Are you going to be a fitna to my ummah, ya Mu'az? Regarding this issue of prolonging time for prayer.
Prolonging time, which gives ajr,
exactly,
which gives reward,
exactly.
And yet still the Prophet said,
are you going to be a fitna to my ummah, ya Mu'az? So if you look at this, then you understand the significance and the importance of the idea of choose the easiest opinion. We earlier talked about talfiq. Talfiq is about sorting for solution, scouting for solution. Where can I find the solution? And I think it's tied to this idea of diversity of my ummah is rahmah. Is a blessing, so that you can find something that will not become difficult and a problem for people. Look at what Rasulullah said about the deen. He said, that religion is ease. In fact, nobody makes it difficult for himself until and unless it overwhelmed him. That was what Rasulullah said. So this idea of talfiq, where you look around, legitimate search for solution that scholars usually do. When we were discussing about Hajj, we talked about it on different aspects of the deen. Another example that you would find is on the case of, for example, paying back, on the case of missed prayer. Somebody who missed prayer, what will he do? You will find a variety of opinion. While some are tough and very difficult, that you have to pay back every salah that you missed. Particularly, and I think the most interesting one is about the case of somebody who was insane and he recovered, or somebody that was in a coma. Supposing somebody is in a coma for like 3 years, and now he recovered miraculously, suddenly he recovered. There are some opinions that insist that he has to pay back all the salah that he missed, while others would think this is something that you are not accountable for. I mean, we talked about when we were talking about hifzul aql, how the determinant, one of the elements that justify responsibility on a human being is this issue of insanity, being aware, mentally active, knowing what you are doing. And so these are some of the bases why some of the scholars go with that opinion, that is easier opinion of No, there is nothing on you. You just carry on from where you wake up and life goes on. But you find other opinions, and I think as as funny as sometimes some of these positions might appear, they have a lot of significance and implication. Particularly in a world that is rapidly changing, you have the cases of new convert people that will embrace Islam and find themselves in situations like this. And if you begin to come up with this very tough, difficult fatwas, for example, how do you think it will turn out to be?
They will run away.
Of course, yes. So these are some of the issues regarding all the benefits or the value or the wisdom behind this idea of recommendation of go with the easier opinion.
And I think, as you've said, I mean, if you want to make things hard for yourself, that's not even in line with the Sunnah. But okay, that's you. Suffer alone. Yeah, but don't impose it on others, because that was not the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, not for himself. That was not the Sunnah of the Prophet for others. As you've mentioned, he criticized Sahaba who unnecessarily made things difficult for people. He even said, Yassir wala tu'assir, Bashir wala tunafir. Make things easy, don't make them difficult. Don't, give glad tidings, don't drive people away. And unfortunately, for some, if the teaching is not tough, it's not Islamic enough. It's as if Taysir is not a maqasid. It's as if difficulty is what Allah wants when He makes itself clear, in two ways. He says, Allahu yuridu bikum al-yusra wa la yuridu bikum al-usra. Allah desires ease. He does not desire, like, which one did we not understand? But again, very qati in that sense. But again, some have the concept of, I'll make it a bit tough on myself. But Allah judges actions by intentions. To move on to the next, Nasir, this question of where scholars differ, tell us, to take the opinion that is in line with the leadership. Tell us more.
Yeah, there is that opinion which recommends that you go with the opinion of the leadership. And the idea or the argument around that is about, if you look at how the Quran emphasizes on the importance of obeying leadership. That you should obey Allah, you should obey the Messenger of Allah, and then you obey those in authority. And another important reason presented by this group of scholars is the fact that usually the objective in the mind of a leader is about the maslahah of the ummah, is about public benefit and interest. And therefore, whatever will be the position of the leadership will definitely be about easing things for people. It will be about the maslahah of the followers or of the people. So these are some of the reasons, and definitely they will be looking at issues around socio-economic development and improving the well-being of the people in whatever position they take. And so in trying to come up with the examples that are relevant to this particular position, you would find leaders having the ability to come up with, for example, legal reforms that will help and will immeasurably contribute in the transformation and development of a society. Legal reforms and reforms around issues of marriage, issues of family, issues of social well-being of the people. It is still within the scope of abilities of leaders, issues around the unity of the ummah, issues around moon sighting, and many other issues to do with issues around security. Look at what leadership could do in managing issues around pandemic. Look at COVID-19, for example, and look at what role leadership played in trying to safeguard the life of people. So these are some of the things that those who think considering the opinion of the leaders always look at, because they are looking at the maslahah, which is a very important aspect that religion and Islam essentially prioritize. So these are some of the examples you can find around this argument of you go with the position of the leaders or leadership.
And I think the fact that Allah says, "Atiullah wa atiur Rasul wa ulil amri minkum," and we find so many hadith insisting on obedience to leaders. Sometimes even if the leaders are being unjust, at least from your own perspective, you have to have a really good reason to disobey a leader. Maybe he is making you do something that is haram, or wanting to prevent you from doing something that is fard. Then, of course, obedience to Allah is priority over obedience to any creature. But the scholars would say, if a leader wants you to do something that is makruh, you should obey the leader, because there is no sin in makruh. There's sin in haram, but there's no sin in makruh. If a leader says you should not do something that is mustahab, something that is encouraged, it is rewarding to do, but the leader says don't do it, then because there's no sin in obeying the leader there, you actually have a reward for obedience to the leader. Why? Because unfortunately, just the reality of most societies is leaders don't explain why they make all decisions to everybody or to everybody's satisfaction. And sometimes when these leaders make decisions based on expert advice that we are not convinced by, we end up creating anarchy. We end up making people stop listening to the leaders. So when actually that unity is critical, we have made people more accustomed to disobeying leaders to the detriment of the community. So as you've mentioned, there are definitely those areas where it is of immense importance that we listen to leaders on some issues. A question of following your conscience, a question of going with your heart, Sister Salah. What's the elaboration there?
This question of following one's heart, one's conscience. I know a lot of times now we hear, follow your heart, follow your heart. But when we talk about it in this context, it's not about go with your emotions, go with what you like. It's based on several variants of a particular saying of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, where he was talking about the fact that, how do you differentiate between something that is sinful and something that is not? And he said, sin is that thing that makes your heart waver, and that thing that you don't want people to know about. And in several variations of the hadith, he actually was saying to a particular companion, consult your heart, consult your heart. In one of these narrations, he added, consult your soul. And he said, you use that to determine what is wrong and what is right. And he added in one of those narrations that even if, you are given fatwa upon fatwa upon fatwa to do the opposite, but you check your heart and you say, I still do not feel at ease with going with this fatwa. In that case, you look at the available opinions, you look at the maqasid Shariah, and you take a path that makes your heart feel at ease. The first time I saw this, I was, I think, surprised by it, because everything I had known up to that point was go with the Quran, go with the Sunnah, go with opinions of scholars, especially when you trust what they are bringing. But here it was saying, discountenance all of that if your heart is not at ease. And I kept trying to think, why would that be? Why would that be? Now, if we look at some of the options we have mentioned so far, we talked about the local scholar and how the scholar who lives within a geographic location, within a particular time, is the person who understands the trends, the level, the conditions, the usages, and all of that. So think of yourself as a geographic location. Think of yourself as a space in time. There are things you know about yourself that the person giving you fatwa doesn't know. There are things you know about yourself that even the person closest to you does not know. There are thoughts going on in your head. There are considerations you have. There are things that are impacting upon you or, having an effect upon you that people don't know. So the fatwa says this is permissible. But you know yourself that I think it would be wiser, knowing myself, to just assume that I'm the exception. That is not permissible for me. I remember having a conversation with a friend once, and she was mentioning how seriously she takes certain aspects of Islam. And she said that people might look at her and say, oh, you are so serious about Islam and all that. And she chuckled and she said, they don't know why hold on to these things with such fervor? She said, because I know the battles I have fought in the past with my nerves. I know the battles I'm still fighting, and that is why I am this way. So even when we talk about do what is convenient, what is easy, we also want to just remind people that we don't mean don't strive. That's not what we are saying. But there are times when you decide, I'm not going to go along this path because there are things about myself I know. And the interesting thing about the heart wavering is there are times you cannot articulate why something makes you uncomfortable. You can't articulate why something, an opinion, is still not sitting well with you. But that listen to your conscience, listen to your soul is vital, especially where you have made the effort to be aware of the state of your conscience. If not, the armed robber is going to say, well, my heart is not shaking at all. I'm okay. But it's really where you know you are making the efforts to be alive to your conscience. And this is still, it's not to say, and we keep repeating that we are disrespecting scholars or dismissing their opinions. This is really what we bring up when we say we look at differences of opinion among scholars and we are trying to find our way through. And when we say, okay, as Brother Nuru mentions, that some people, or was it Brother Nasir, that some people look at contemporary scholars and they don't value them. They say, well, this classical scholar said. And I just remember once, I think, when we were discussing about some of these classical scholars, and you look at their biography, and you realize during their time, they were ordinary folk. Some of them during their time, they were dismissed, they were oppressed by the leaders, they had people dismissing things they had to say. It's over time that appreciation grew for their learning and their teaching. So some of the contemporary scholars that we might be dismissing today because of when did you start giving fatwa, when did you start preaching? Is it not just a few years ago you got your Instagram page? It's not even yet on Facebook and all of that. These are some of the scholars, if Allah wills, in another 100 years, if humanity is still around, they will be citing them and ready to go to war with anybody who says the opinion is not acceptable.
I think some of the issues Sister Salatu was talking about reminds me of how some scholars actually talking about this issue of consult yourself and the value of how you remember yesterday we were talking about how comfort is associated with doing the right thing. Where we talked about this hadith of al-birru husnul khuluq wal-ithmu ma haka fi nafsik wa karita an yaqdi alayka an-nas, that it is good character, good conduct, good values represent goodness and birr as described by Rasulullah. But he said sin or terrible things are those things that inside you just feel not comfortable and you don't even want people to see. And look at some of the ahadith that Rasul talks about this sense of ease that you have in mind when you're doing the right thing. How your body, I would think this order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that if you are aligned with it, you will feel it deep inside you. And I think some of the interpretations and the points that are raised around this issue of istaftah and go with what is okay with your heart is around of all the views and the positions presented by scholars, which one you feel you are most comfortable with, which one you feel you are more at ease with, which one do you feel you are ready to face Allah with. Because at the end of the day, it's not about what anybody said. It's about what you feel more comfortable facing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with. And another interesting thing was actually this argument. I can't remember where I read it, but I think it was attributed to Imam al-Ghazali, where he said, human being is a product of two components, the physical self and the soul, or what we call the spiritual component. And talking about sustenance, he said if you look at it, the means of sustenance of a human being comes from the source of that particular component, that is the body. Almost everything you need to sustain the body comes from the source of the body, that is the soil. And therefore, for you to find order and to live comfortably, you have to ensure that the means of sustenance of your soul comes from its source. And that is why the confusion in life is associated with not actually getting what nourishes your soul from its source. Just like it works with the body. So I think if you look at this metaphor, then it makes a lot of sense when you begin to connect what is right and sense of comfort and ease with the soul and the body, because that connection of the source and the order. And another important thing is how some scholars will talk about everything is designed in an order by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the whole idea of creation is for us to roll along that trajectory. We have to work in unison, uniformly with all these provisions and what have you. And how when friction begins to manifest, you will see it, you will feel it, you will see it happening. So these are some of the things that reflecting over the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how these things are interconnected and they work, I think makes a lot of sense with the discussion you are making around this issue of search your soul, get back to your heart and get to hear and listen and begin to make sense of all that. And you can find, even in the Islamic tradition, a lot of discussions around what really the heart is, beyond what probably we think about it in biology and other natural sciences.
Yeah, and if I may just add to that point, because one keeps looking at this issue of search your soul, search your conscience, and I said, I had mentioned this idea of the conscience as really a healthy one for it to give you the right signal, and then we go back again to some of those things that help us to do that, and we touch on them and that polishing of the heart, that it's essential if one is to take this option and be rightly guided. The acts of acts of charity and the intention behind acts of charity, the salah and the intention behind the salah, the speaking good words and having an intention behind it. That's the of connecting with Allah. So it goes back to that discussion of maqasid, always having that intention to accrue benefit and push away harm. That is actually like a starting point. Just having that overarching maqasid in mind is a starting point for strengthening the heart and the conscience. May Allah guide us right.
Amen.
MashaAllah. I think, you've given a lot of options that are presented by scholars, contexts where one opinion would be regarded as more relevant than another. As we come to the end of this discussion, what advice would you give when it comes to choosing which opinion or combination of opinions, being cognizant that for some people there's paralysis when they hear difference of opinion, not sure what to do. For some, they may just want to take advantage of the fact that there's difference of opinion and just take whatever they want for their own purposes. What's the best way to advise people on what to do when faced with these alternatives? Madam Nasser.
Well, I think as we have seen, the variety of suggestions and recommendations made by scholars on what to do, it's good to remember in approaching issues, there are a lot of factors that scholars really looked at. They looked at what the issue is specifically. They look at who is the person asking the question and what is his condition or situation. They look at who are the experts in the field in that particular subject. They also look at the historical context of the issue in question. Not only that, they also look at existing views, or what does that particular person asking question knows about the views of scholars around this particular subject area. They look at a lot of issues. These variables that are really complex and diverse, which scholars looked at, will now make you appreciate the fact that the issue of understanding issues around religion and issues of fatwa is not an easy task, and therefore the need to respect this diverse opinion and the hard work that scholars put into it in trying to resolve these issues, and to respect brotherhood and the maqasid of unity in trying to approach issues of fatwa and product of ijtihad, because of the significance of brotherhood. I will conclude with a very important statement by one of the great scholars of Islam, Sufyan al-Thawri, who said, when you see somebody doing something on which scholars differ, something wrong, according to you, on issues where scholars differ, you shouldn't stop him, because at least he has something, he has a position of authority, something he relied on. So I think that stress on the need for us to respect diversity of opinion, to respect and appreciate the value of brotherhood and unity amongst the Muslim Ummah.
Sister Salah, what would you add to this?
That it's also necessary for us to take responsibility as much as possible for our own development and learning, and an area or a few areas where learning would benefit us in understanding why scholars differ, in figuring out which opinion to go with, is if we learn more about usul al-fiqh, if we learn more about maqasid al-sharia, we learn more about al-qawaid al-fiqhiyya. These three fields, the methodologies of evidence and proofs that scholars use, the higher aims and objectives of Islamic law, as well as the maxims that guide us, those principles, that if we understand these three fields, it improves the quality of how well we understand and practice Islam. Then lastly, and I think most importantly, is to continuously pray for guidance, to pray for enlightenment from Allah, and to also pray for forgiveness for where we may go wrong.
Jazakumullahu khairan. I think the little I would add is to just remember that if you compare your opinion 10 years ago with your opinion on certain things 5 years ago, you see the change. With your opinion 1 year ago, and probably going through a new book on Islam, going through this course, going through any new course of study, how many of your opinions have changed again with new knowledge? But then also to have the humility to recognize that in the next 5 years, you will probably maybe change your opinion again on something, especially if it's an area of ijtihad. While the ma'lumin ad-din bid-darura will, they just stay the same. The rest, you keep learning, you keep seeing scholars having differing views, to recognize that just as your opinions change, the opinions of others also change. And the metaphor you raised earlier, that scholars are like trees with fruit. Some fruit are ripe and ready for the context. Others are raw. Scholars are still learning. So, opinion will get better with time. Some opinions have expired. Some opinions are not relevant probably to your context. But even when you say the fruit is ripe, sometimes you like it, somebody else doesn't like it. It doesn't mean it's bad. Maybe you're the one who doesn't know what good fruit tastes like. But definitely don't cut the fruit tree. Don't destroy the tree. The need to be humble, respect scholars, respect scholarship, to continue to be careful about the dangers of certainty on issues where scholars differ. To recognize that ijtihad by definition is dealing with dhanni, and once you found difference of opinions, whichever opinion is taken, it's an approximation of the truth, and Allah knows best, and may Allah continue to guide us all. I'd like to thank you both for your contributions. Jazakumullahu khairan. Until we meet again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.